Good afternoon. My name is Lacey McLemore, and I have been teaching Year 1 of IB Language and Literature during the 2018-2019 school year. This video is to explain the IB summer assignment for the Year 1 course candidates and diploma program candidates in summer of 2019. So I want to start with the background and purpose of this assignment. I went and created a new assignment different from the previous summer assignment based on student responses and my own experience with the previous summer assignment. So semester 1 of IB Language and Literature is dedicated to language and cultural context. Therefore, all students should come into the course already thinking about the ways in which various cultures, ethnicities, age groups, genders, etc. use language in order to achieve various purposes and with various audiences. Based on the qualitative data that I was discussing from the current IB Year 2 cohort, and my own experience, the following task has been created for IB Year 1 students as a way to not only prepare them for the course, but also prepare them for the work we will do together in semester 1 of IB Language and Literature. Below, you're going to see a list of the applicable standards. These are the IB learning outcomes for Part 1, Language and Cultural Context. This is semester 1 of our program, and these are to analyze how audience and purpose affect the structure and content of texts, as well as to analyze the impact of language changes and demonstrate an awareness of how language and meaning are shaped by both culture and context. You'll also find the Georgia Standards of Excellence listed here. I won't read those out to you because they're pretty boring, as well as the Talented and Gifted Standards for Fulton County Schools. Detailed and step-by-step instructions for the summer assignment are below this. And I tried to keep this at one page, so there are a lot of bullet points here. All of these are going to go in chronological order, so you should be able to check off each of these boxes as you go, so that you're fully prepared to complete the last portion of the task down below. So first, to begin, you really need to read the provided informational documents on language ideologies. So if you can click on these, you'll see that they open up. Each one of them is going to open up into a slideshow that should be pretty digestible to read. Just some beginner information on these different types of topics. These are things that I used in class this year, so you probably, you want to look at the warm-up and you want to look at the classwork and you want to think about these things, but those are not going to really be applicable to you in the summer when you're not in the classroom. So you want to think about the closing notes and the key terms of this assignment. Some of these will also have homework sections, and you can look at those if you need to have additional resources on understanding the material. So all of those are going to open up into these different slides, and this is all coming from Michelle Devereaux's text on language and power, language and society, and language and identity. Then you're going to have the social variations text. This is also going to open up, but it's going to open up into a PDF. It won't be as digestible, and you'll just skip that first page. That's why there is an X on it, and you'll begin reading here, which is why I have created this comment. So you can see 2 case studies of regional variation, such as Appalachian English. It's going to go into some phonological features of Appalachian English and lexical features. Then you can see language change at work, some concepts, some ideas of California English, the lexical features, and the phonological features of that as well. And then finally, social variation. So slang and jargon versus dialects, social dialects, and then you're going to look at 2 case studies of social variation, Chicano English and African American English. You're going to look at historical origins, the phonological features, the morphological and syntactic features, as well as the lexical features and the features of these languages. Okay? All right. After you do that, I want you to also think about your prior knowledge of the characteristics of standard English. So this is typically what you think of when you think of a traditional English teacher with a red pen going through and making corrections to an essay. You might think of something like them correcting whose to whom's, or thinking about in which instead of for this reason, or there are all these different types of formal language that you hear. And this is something that you have learned about your entire life throughout your schooling. But if you want to complete your own research on what standard English is, please feel free to do so, which is why I have that listed here. All right, so after you've done that preliminary work, which my students from this year said was incredibly beneficial to do, then I want you to read one of the following fiction texts. And these, I think, are going to be very interesting texts, but they are also very salacious in some cases. So Homeboys, for example, is about gangs and gang violence. So there are some touchy subjects in this text. I would say that this is definitely the more explicit of the two texts. But then you also have Mexican White Boy, which is kind of a coming of age story of a boy who is trying to find his way in the culture that he's living in. So he's of mixed race, he has a white mom, his dad is from Mexico, and he's sort of trying to find his way, but he doesn't know Spanish, and so that is making things very difficult for him. It's still got, your traditional young adult interesting stuff. Like, for example, he wants to have a girlfriend, he wants to play baseball, and there's cursing and things like that, but it is not as explicit as Homeboys is. So please make sure that you read reviews of the contents of these texts prior to making your decision on which text you would like to choose. After you've picked that, though, they're mostly the same length. I think there might be a difference of 20 or 30 pages, but I think that you're going to like both of them because they are specifically targeted toward young adult readers. And while you're reading those texts, I want you to create a presentation or a slideshow on the ways in which language dialects are presented. So you might make some notes as you go along answering these questions, and then come back and make the presentation, make it all pretty later, or you might just answer these questions as you go, though some of them you're going to have to read the entire book to be able to answer them. And you're going to submit this presentation, this document, to Turnitin.com on the day we return to school. So Turnitin.com will accept both Microsoft PowerPoint and Google Slides, so that's really up to you on the program that you would like to use to create this presentation. I've indicated the number of slides on each of the following questions as just a guide in your completion of the work. So if you're wondering, oh geez, what should I prioritize? What should I not talk about as much? You'll see the number of slides provided. I feel like each of these questions under these headers do deserve at least one slide, but you might feel that you have more to say and you might make 2 slides, but you probably don't want to go over that. This should not be, 30 slides long or 25 slides long or anything like that. Using these guides, you'll have a 14-slide PowerPoint. So first we want to start with the context of the book. You want to provide just a general summary so that the reader knows what they're about to be learning about when you think about the dialects. And you'll see that the dialects, the language and identity, the language and society, language and power are going to directly correlate with these portions of the provided reading. So you're really going to need to have that background information going into reading this book, because or going into reading whichever book you choose, because you're going to need to be able to apply that background information in order to answer these questions. So for the dialects, you're going to talk about what dialects are going to be discussed, what are the characteristics of those dialects, and this is something that we're going to come back to time and time and time again. So going ahead and memorizing a few key features of them is going to be very helpful to you in the future. You want to also look at language and identity. So think about to what extent does our use of language define who we are, and how does gender or ethnicity affect language use? And instead of who we are here, I'm going to put who the characters are, and I'm going to put language use of the characters. And then down below, that might be something that you could consider yourself. To what extent does our use of language define who we are And how does your own gender or ethnicity affect your own language use? Okay. I'm going to come back to that later. You're also going to have some slides on language and society. So thinking about who is the audience of this text. I just told you they're both young adult novels. So clearly the audience is you, young people. But how does that impact the language that the author uses? How do the characters' speech patterns also change in various situations and with different people? Language and power. Think about what is the language dialect of power in this text, why, and how do you know? It might not always be the language dialect or the dialect of language that is in power in America or in different countries. It might not be standard English is the language of power or is the dialect of the language of power in this text. It might be that it's Ave, or it might be that it's Chicano English, or it might be slang, which is typically used by youth. All of those things you want to consider here. And you want to think about how do those different dialects create both an inclusive, so something that includes a lot of people, and an exclusive atmosphere within those texts. Also, I want you to consider some literary features. We're going to delve more into literary features, literary terms, literary devices as we enter semester 2 of IB, but it's going to be a really good primer, I think, for you to go ahead and think about literary features now, especially as you're reading a text which you may be more comfortable with and may find easier to read, and then text that we may read later in the semester. So think about what kind of impact does the language used in the text have on the theme of the text, and also what notable literary features or devices are used alongside these dialects of language. Think about how language, like up here, with language and identity and language and society, how does it characterize us? How does it provide a tone of the text? How does it show or demonstrate a mood of the text? What about the setting, etc., and why? To what effect? Okay. Then I also want you to choose some text itself to analyze. So I want you to choose a 20 to 40 line passage from the text, and this should be a single passage. So you're going to have to go through and you're going to have to look and see which passage is going to be best for this text analysis. 20 to 40 lines, single passage from the text. And then I want you to include a concise and clear explanation which demonstrates the above ideas regarding dialect and language use. So you want to find something that's really juicy, really meaty, that you can apply all of this stuff to. And then finally, I want you to reflect. A big part of IB is reflecting on the work that we're doing and how that work applies to us as well as the world as a whole. So reflect on your own understanding now of all of these dialects, language, and the language ideologies of our society. Did you know about these? Did you know they had names? How does having all of this information make you feel about the language around you? Are you noticing it more? And then think about, to what extent can language be powerful or create a sense of power in any given context? To what extent does our use of language define who we are? And how does your gender or ethnicity affect your own language use? So those are things that you might want to consider. And I'm going to just switch this now to 2 slides since I've added in some more information there to consider. And finally, you're all wondering, right, how am I going to be graded? Well, your student work is going to be graded based on not only student completion of the above portions of the assignment, but also based on the level of organization, innovation, and creativity that you use in order to demonstrate and apply your knowledge of language, language dialects, and their uses with various speakers and audiences. So I hope that this video makes this assignment a little bit more clear, provides a little bit more background on why you're doing this, on my purpose for assigning this, and on how you should complete the work and the breakdown. That being said, if you have any questions over the summer, please feel free to email me using my Fulton County Schools email address, which can be found on the school's website. Thank you so much for your time.